Julian Vance watched the rain trace frantic, meaningless patterns on the wide expanse of glass. Each drop was a silver tear, blurring the world outside into a watercolor wash of gray steel and wet asphalt. The city was a symphony of muted tones, a perfect reflection of the landscape inside his own chest. His coffee, once a vessel of fragrant dark warmth, had long since surrendered to the ambient chill of the cafe. He had not taken a sip in at least 20 minutes. The porcelain was cool against his fingertips, a small, tangible reminder of a pleasure that had faded into indifference. It was one of 1,000 such pleasures he no longer registered. Across the small marble table from him, a splash of impossible color existed. Lily, his 6-year-old daughter, was a pocket of sunshine in the monochrome world he inhabited. Her small head, covered in a riot of black curls, was bent in concentration over a piece of paper. Her tongue was peeking out from the corner of her mouth, a habit she'd inherited from her mother. The thought came and went without its usual searing pain, leaving only a dull, familiar ache like a phantom limb. She was drawing a garden, unruly, vibrant flowers in shades of crayon that did not exist in nature, fuchsia roses with canary yellow stems, cobalt blue daisies with emerald green centers. It was a world of chaotic joy, a place he could no longer imagine, let alone visit. He was the steward of her world now, a silent gray guardian standing at the gates of a garden he could not enter. He was a man constructed of obligations, chairman of a board, leader of an enterprise, a name in headlines he never read. But here, in the quiet anonymity of a Saturday afternoon cafe, he was just a father who felt like an imposter, a man going through the motions of care without the engine of feeling that should have powered them. He made sure Lily was fed, clothed, safe. He provided structure. He provided resources. He had forgotten how to provide warmth. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, but it was vast. It was the silence of two people sharing a space but inhabiting different universes. Hers was filled with the scratchy sound of wax on paper and the silent stories of her impossible flowers. His was filled with the ghost of a laugh and the echoing memory of a promise to grow old together, a promise now buried under 6 feet of cold earth. Suddenly, the scratching stopped. Lily looked up, her dark eyes so much like Caroline's, holding a clarity that often unnerved him. She looked past him, her gaze fixed on something over his shoulder. A small smile touched her lips. It was a genuine, unguarded expression of delight, and seeing it felt like watching a language he no longer spoke. He did not turn around. He was not interested in what had captured her attention. He had long ago learned to triage the world into 2 categories: things concerning Lily's immediate safety and everything else. The latter was a vast ocean of noise he had no energy to navigate. But Lily was not content to simply observe. With the sudden, frictionless energy of a small child, she slid from her chair. Her half-finished garden was left abandoned. "Lily," he said, his voice a low rumble, devoid of any real authority. It was a sound meant to tether her to him, but the string had grown too long, too frayed. She ignored him, her small sneakers squeaking softly on the polished concrete floor. He watched her go, a tiny figure in a bright yellow raincoat, navigating the forest of tables and chairs. He should have stood up. He should have called her back more forcefully, but the effort required felt monumental, a mountain of will he could not summon the strength to climb. So he just watched. He saw her stop at a small table near the window, occupied by a single woman. He could only see the woman's back. She had dark hair tied up in a simple, slightly messy bun. She was wearing a plain gray sweater. She seemed to blend into the scenery as much as he did. Lily stood there for a moment, simply staring. Julian felt a prickle of social anxiety, a vestigial emotion from his former life. He should intervene. He should apologize for his daughter's intrusion. He began the slow, arduous process of pushing his chair back. Before he could rise, the woman turned. He saw her profile first, a gentle curve of a cheek, a straight nose. She looked tired, he thought. There were faint, bruised-looking shadows under her eyes, but her expression as she looked down at Lily was one of soft surprise, not annoyance. He could not hear what Lily was saying, but he saw the woman's posture shift. She leaned forward, resting her chin in her hand, giving the small girl her complete, undivided attention. It was a gesture of such simple, profound respect that it struck a dissonant chord within him. When had he last given anyone, even his own daughter, his undivided attention? Finally, the inertia broke. He stood, his joints protesting the movement. He walked towards them, his expensive leather shoes making no sound. As he got closer, he could hear their voices. "And that's why you're smiling," Lily was finishing with the irrefutable logic of a 6-year-old. The woman's smile widened. It was a lovely, genuine thing. It lit up her face, chasing away some of the weariness in her eyes. "Well, I suppose it is," she said, her voice soft and warm, like worn flannel. "The rain makes the world clean." Lily considered this with solemn gravity. Then she turned her gaze back towards her father, who was now standing just a few feet away. She pointed a small, crayon-stained finger at him. "My daddy forgot how to smile," she announced to the woman, a statement of fact, not of judgment. The words landed in the quiet air of the cafe with the weight of stones. They were simple, they were direct, they were devastatingly true. It was a question adults had stopped asking him, a truth they politely ignored. They spoke of market shares and quarterly reports, of legacy and endowments. No one dared to look him in the eye and ask about the hollowing out of his soul. But a child could, a child would. The woman's gaze lifted from Lily and met his. Her eyes were a warm, clear brown, and in them he saw not pity, but a flicker of startled empathy. There was no judgment, no awkwardness. There was only a quiet, shared understanding of a difficult truth. He felt his face flush, a hot wave of shame and exposure. He was Julian Vance. Men who manage billions did not get called out by their daughters in public for being sad. "I am so sorry," he said, his voice emerging rougher than he intended. He placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. "She shouldn't be bothering you." The woman, Ilara, shook her head slightly. "She's no bother at all," she said, her smile returning, though it was softer now, more reserved. "She was just telling me about her garden." He looked down at his daughter, who was now beaming, proud of the connection she had forged. He was supposed to be her bridge to the world, but more often than not, she was his. "We should go," he said, his hand gently urging Lily away. "Wait," the woman said. She reached into a simple canvas tote bag at her feet and pulled out a small, wax paper-wrapped parcel. She unfolded the edges to reveal a cookie. It was not a perfect, machine-cut circle from a bakery. It was lopsided, a little too brown on one edge, a homemade, imperfect thing, an oatmeal raisin cookie studded with unevenly distributed raisins. She broke a small piece off and offered it to Lily. "For the gardener," she said softly. Lily took it with the reverence of a holy sacrament. Julian found himself watching the woman's hands. They were clean and capable, but her knuckles were slightly red, her nails short and practical. They were the hands of someone who worked, and worked hard. "Thank you," he said, the words feeling inadequate. He was a man who could buy his daughter 1,000 bakeries, but he could not conjure a single, simple gesture of spontaneous kindness like this. "It's just a cookie," she replied, offering him a small, shy smile before turning her attention back to the rain-streaked window. The conversation was over. The brief intersection of their worlds was complete. He guided Lily back to their table. She nibbled on her piece of cookie, her face a mask of pure bliss. He gathered her crayons, tucking them back into their box. He picked up her drawing of the impossible garden. As he did, he glanced back at the woman. She was staring out the window again, lost in her own thoughts, a solitary figure in a gray sweater, a stranger, but something had shifted. A single pure note of warmth had been struck in the silent, cold cathedral of his grief. Lily finished her cookie crumb and looked up at him. "Her name is Alara," Lily whispered as if sharing a great secret. "She tastes like cinnamon." Julian looked from his daughter's hopeful face to the drawing in his hand. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, a genuine, involuntary smile touched his own lips. It felt foreign, like stretching a muscle he had not used in years. It was small and fleeting, but it was real. And in the gray expanse of his world, it felt like the first tentative bloom in a long-abandoned garden. The smile faded, but the warmth of it lingered. He found himself replaying the brief encounter. The woman, Alara, had not been impressed or intimidated or sycophantic. She had not recognized him. To her, he was not Julian Vance, CEO of Vance Holdings, a fixture on financial news networks. He was just the father of a little girl, a sad man who had forgotten how to smile. That anonymity was a strange and profound relief. In his world, every interaction was freighted with the weight of his name, his position, his wealth. People wanted something from him, a donation, an investment, a connection. Their kindness was a currency, their smiles a negotiation. But Alara's kindness had been weightless. The cookie was not an investment, it was just a cookie. An imperfect, homemade, freely given thing. It was an act of pure, uncalculated humanity. He could not remember the last time he had been on the receiving end of such a thing. He realized he was still holding Lily's drawing. He looked at the chaotic, joyful flowers. He had spent the last 2 years building walls, fortifying his grief, keeping the world at a calculated distance. But a 6-year-old girl and a woman with tired eyes had just effortlessly tossed a small, cinnamon-flavored stone over the highest parapet, and the ripples were spreading through the still, stagnant water of his heart. He folded the drawing carefully and tucked it into the inner pocket of his coat, a secret splash of color he would carry with him, out into the gray, rainy city. Monday morning brought with it the familiar armor of his routine, the tailored suit, the silk tie, the hushed reverence of the executive floor. His office was a glass-walled sanctuary 40 stories above the city, a place of quiet power and sterile order. The rain had passed, but the sky remained a flat, indifferent sheet of white. He moved through the morning in a fog of meetings and conference calls, his mind processing data, his mouth forming the correct, authoritative words. But underneath it all, a small, quiet part of his awareness was elsewhere. It was in a cafe, watching a lopsided cookie being offered to his daughter. He had dismissed the encounter as a fleeting moment, a brief anomaly, but the memory of it persisted. The memory of Alara's gentle smile, of the uncomplicated kindness in her eyes. It was a burr under the saddle of his carefully managed apathy. Late that evening, long after the offices had emptied and the building had settled into its nocturnal hum, he was walking through the main lobby towards the garage. The cavernous space, usually bustling with energy, was now quiet and dim, populated only by the faint scent of cleaning solution and the soft whir of a floor polisher in the distance. He saw the cleaning crew, a small team moving with quiet efficiency through the vast marble expanse. They were a part of the building's ecosystem he rarely noticed, their presence as ambient and expected as the air conditioning. They were, to the building's daytime inhabitants, largely invisible. And then he saw her. She was wearing a simple dark blue uniform that did nothing to flatter her. Her hair was pulled back in the same functional bun. She was wiping down the glass of a directory kiosk. Her movements practiced and economical. It was her, the woman from the cafe. Alara. Julian stopped. The world seemed to tilt slightly on its axis. She worked here, in his building. She was one of the invisible people who kept his world pristine and orderly. He had walked past her, he realized with a jolt, hundreds of times. He had looked straight through her. He felt a strange mix of emotions. Surprise, certainly, but also a pang of something that felt like shame. He, who prided himself on his perception, on seeing the details others missed, had been utterly blind. At that moment, a small figure darted out from the security office, where she had been waiting for him to finish his work. Lily, clutching a new drawing, ran across the lobby. "Daddy, I finished," she called out. Then she saw Alara. Her face lit up with the pure, unadulterated joy of a child spotting a beloved friend. "Sunshine Lady," Lily shouted, her small voice echoing in the cavernous space. Alara turned, startled by the sound. Her eyes widened in recognition as she saw Lily, and then, a moment later, Julian. A faint blush crept up her neck. In her simple cleaner's uniform under the harsh, fluorescent lights of the lobby, she seemed smaller, more vulnerable. She looked flustered, as if she had been caught out of place. Lily, oblivious to any social awkwardness, ran right up to her and thrust the drawing into her hands. "It's for you," she declared. "It's a sun garden, because you're the Sunshine Lady." Alara took the paper, her gaze softening as she looked at the drawing. It was another explosion of color, a yellow sun with a smiling face, beaming down on a field of misshapen, happy-looking flowers. "It's beautiful, Lily," Alara said, her voice a soft murmur. "Thank you." She looked up at Julian, a question in her eyes, an apology. "I'm just the cleaner, sir." The words were unspoken, but he heard them loud and clear. He walked over, his footsteps loud on the marble. "Hello again," he said, his voice softer than he'd intended. "Mr. Vance," she said, her tone formal, respectful. She knew who he was now. The realization landed with a dull thud. The brief, perfect anonymity of the cafe was gone, replaced by the rigid hierarchy of employer and employee. "I'm sorry, she shouldn't be—" "It's all right," he interrupted gently. "She was excited to see you." He looked at the drawing in Alara's hands. "Sunshine Lady, I like that." A small, genuine smile touched Alara's lips before she quickly suppressed it. "I should get back to work, sir." As she turned, Lily, who had been waiting patiently, took a sudden, energetic skip. Her foot caught on the edge of a freshly mopped section of the floor. Her arms pinwheeled, and she went down with a surprised cry, her knee hitting the hard marble with a sickening smack. The sound shattered the quiet lobby. For a moment Julian froze. A cold, paralyzing panic seized him. It was the same helplessness he'd felt in the hospital, the same useless terror. His mind went blank. But Alara moved instantly. She was kneeling by Lily's side before Julian had even processed what had happened. There was no panic in her movements, only calm, focused competence. "Shh, shh, you're okay, sweet pea," she murmured, her voice a soothing balm. "Let's have a look." Tears were welling in Lily's eyes, her face scrunched up in pain and surprise. Alara gently examined the knee. It was a nasty scrape, already beginning to bleed. Julian finally knelt beside them, feeling large and clumsy and utterly useless. "Is she okay? Should I call a doctor?" Alara glanced at him, her expression calm and reassuring. "She's all right. It's just a scrape, a brave gardener's wound." She gave Lily a small wink. Then she reached into the pocket of her uniform and pulled out a small plastic pouch. From it she produced an antiseptic wipe and a brightly colored bandage decorated with smiling cartoon stars. "I keep these for my nephew," she explained quietly to Julian, as if sensing his confusion. "He's a professional at falling down." With practiced, gentle hands, she cleaned the scrape. Lily winced but didn't cry out, her attention captured by Alara's calm demeanor. Alara applied the bandage with a flourish. "There," she said, her voice full of soft cheer. a magic star to make it all better. Lily looked down at her knee, her tears already forgotten. She sniffled once, then touched the bandage with a reverent finger. "A magic star," she whispered. Alara helped her to her feet, and Lily immediately threw her arms around Alara's waist, burying her face in the coarse fabric of her uniform. "Thank you, Sunshine Lady," she mumbled. Alara stood for a moment surprised, before her arms came up to gently pat Lily's back. Over the top of his daughter's head, her eyes met Julian's. In that moment, the roles were reversed. He was the one in need of reassurance, and she, the quiet cleaner, was the one providing it. He saw in her a deep, instinctual well of maternal warmth, a gentleness that he struggled every day to access within himself. It was as natural to her as breathing. He finally found his voice. "Thank you, Alara." He used her name deliberately, a small attempt to bridge the gap that had opened between them. She gave him a small, hesitant nod, then gently disentangled herself from Lily's hug. "You should probably get some ice on that when you get home," she said, her professional demeanor slipping back into place. "Sir." She turned and walked back to her cart, her shoulders held a little straighter than before. He watched her go, then looked down at his daughter, who was now proudly displaying her bandaged knee. The next day, tucked into a discreet corner of the cleaner's supply closet, Alara found a brand new professional-grade first aid kit. It was the kind paramedics used, filled with every conceivable type of bandage, ointment, and sterile wrap. Tucked inside was a small typed note on heavy cardstock. It read simply, "For the next emergency." There was no signature, but she knew. Later that afternoon, Julian returned to his desk to find a single sheet of paper placed neatly in the center of his leather blotter. It was a child's drawing of a smiling star. Beneath it, in neat, careful handwriting, were two words: "Thank you." He found himself starting to work late. It was not a conscious decision at first, more of a gradual shift in his routine. He would tell himself there were reports to finish, emails to answer, but in truth, he was waiting. He would sit in his silent, darkened office, the city lights twinkling below like a fallen constellation, and he would wait for the quiet hum of the cleaning crew's arrival. He began to see the building through her eyes. He noticed the scuff marks on the baseboards she had to scrub, the fingerprints on the glass he himself had left, the way the light caught the dust motes in the air. The world she inhabited was one of small, overlooked details, of restoring order in the wake of other people's chaos. Their encounters were brief, hesitant. He would happen to be getting a glass of water when her cart rolled by. He would ask her how her evening was going. At first, she was reserved, her answers short and professional. "Fine, thank you, Mr. Vance." But slowly, tentatively, a different kind of conversation began to emerge in the quiet, empty hours. He learned that she was taking online classes, saving up to one day get a degree in landscape architecture. The irony was not lost on him. The woman Lily called the Sunshine Lady, who had been captivated by a drawing of a garden, dreamed of creating them for a living. He found himself talking too, not about business or finance, but small, personal things he had not shared with anyone. He told her once, as they stood looking out at the glittering cityscape, how his wife, Caroline, had loved the rain, how she had called it the sky's way of washing its face. "That's a nice way to think about it," Alara had said softly, her gaze fixed on the distant lights. "My grandmother used to say it was the clouds watering their gardens." In these quiet moments, the vast gulf between Julian Vance, the CEO, and Alara Hayes, the cleaner, seemed to shrink. They were just two people talking in the dark, sharing small pieces of themselves like secrets. He also learned about the shadows in her past. She spoke vaguely of a former partner, of broken promises and a mountain of debt that was not hers but had become her responsibility. She spoke of it without self-pity, as a simple fact of her life, a hurdle to be overcome. Her resilience was a quiet, steady flame, and he found himself drawn to its warmth. He saw the weariness in her eyes not as a weakness, but as a testament to her strength. One evening, the fragile peace of their burgeoning friendship was shattered. Julian was walking past a conference room when he heard a raised voice. It was Mark Renslow, a senior vice president known for his abrasive personality. "Unacceptable," Renslow was saying, his voice dripping with condescension. "This is a seven-figure deal boardroom, not a truck stop. I expect a certain standard." Julian paused in the shadows of the hallway. He saw Alara standing there, her cleaning cart beside her. She was looking at a faint smudge on the massive mahogany conference table. It was barely visible. "I'm very sorry, sir," Alara said, her voice quiet but steady. "I will clean it again immediately." "See that you do," Renslow sneered before striding out of the room. He brushed past Julian without a second glance. Julian's hands clenched into fists. A cold, protective rage surged through him. He had the power to fire Renslow on the spot. He could destroy the man's career with a single phone call. The temptation was immense. But then he thought of Alara. She would be horrified. She would see it as charity, as an act of pity. She would feel indebted, and the delicate, equal footing they had found in the late-night quiet would be gone forever, replaced by the power imbalance he so desperately wanted to escape. So he did nothing. He stood in the shadows until Renslow was gone, the silence of his inaction feeling like a betrayal. He could not face her right away. He retreated to his office, the anger churning in his stomach. He waited. An hour later, a strange instinct led him not to the hallways she would be cleaning, but to a small, rarely used stairwell at the far end of the floor. He found her there, sitting on the cold concrete steps, her head in her hands. Her shoulders were shaking almost imperceptibly. She was not making a sound, but he knew she was crying. Crying in the one place she thought no one would find her. He did not say anything at first. He simply walked down the steps and sat on the step below hers, his back to her. He did not touch her. He did not offer empty platitudes. He just shared the silence with her, a quiet, solid presence in the dark. After a long moment, the shaking subsided. "He was right," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I missed a spot." Julian's heart ached for her, for the quiet dignity she was trying so hard to maintain. "No," he said, his voice a low murmur. He was a bully who needed to feel powerful. It had nothing to do with you. She was silent for a long time. He could feel her vulnerability, a fragile thing in the space between them. He wanted to fix it, to throw his money and his power at the problem until it went away. But he knew with a certainty that settled deep in his bones that was not what she needed. He turned his head slightly, looking not at her but at the stark concrete wall beside them. "You don't have to be strong all the time, Alara," he said softly. "Not with me." A single choked sob escaped her, the sound of a dam breaking, and then she wept. He did not move. He just sat there, a silent guardian, giving her the one thing no one else did, permission to be fragile. In the cold, anonymous stairwell, surrounded by concrete and steel, a bond of profound and intimate trust was forged. The incident in the stairwell changed things. A new layer of tenderness began to color their interactions. Julian found himself becoming a student of Alara Hayes, noticing the small details of her life with a focused intensity. He saw that the soles of her work shoes were worn thin, the tread almost completely gone. He knew she would never accept money from him, so he arranged for the Human Resources Department to hold a surprise employee appreciation raffle for the night shift staff. It was a fiction, of course. There was only one prize and only one name in the hat. Alara, flustered and embarrassed, won a generous gift certificate to the best shoe store in the city. She accepted it, believing it to be a stroke of luck, but when she wore the new, comfortable, supportive shoes to work for the first time, she caught Julian looking at her feet, and a quick, knowing glance passed between them. He overheard her telling another cleaner how much she missed the herbal tea her grandmother used to make, a specific blend of chamomile and lavender. The next day, 3 boxes of that exact tea appeared in the staff break room with a generic memo about improving employee wellness. He watched from his office camera feed as she discovered it, a small, private smile gracing her lips as she brewed her first cup. These were small, silent gestures, a secret language of care that only the two of them understood. His focus on Alara was a welcome distraction, but it could not entirely eclipse the anxieties of fatherhood. One Thursday evening, Lily was with him at the office. She had a slight cough, but he had dismissed it as a minor cold. He was on an important international call, and Lily was quietly coloring in his personal study, adjacent to the main office. When he finished the call, he went to check on her. She was slumped over her drawing, her face flushed, her breathing shallow. When he touched her forehead, it was burning hot. A wave of pure, cold panic washed over him, the same icy dread he had felt in the moments before he lost Caroline. His mind went utterly blank. All his competence, his decisiveness as a leader, evaporated, leaving only a terrified father. He scooped her into his arms. Her body was limp, listless. "Lily, sweetheart." He stumbled out of his office, his heart hammering against his ribs. He needed to get to a hospital. Urgent care. He did not know. His brain was refusing to function. And then he saw her. Alara was polishing the reception desk at the end of the hall. She looked up, her expression of mild surprise turning instantly to one of deep concern as she saw the panic on his face and the sick child in his arms. She dropped her cloth and rushed to him. "What is it? What's wrong?" "Fever," he managed to choke out. She was fine, and now I don't know what to do. Alara did not panic. She placed a cool, calm hand on Lily's forehead, her touch gentle and sure. "Okay," she said, her voice a steady anchor in his storm of fear. "Okay, Julian." It was the first time she had used his first name so freely. "We need to get her to the clinic on 8th Street. It's the best one for children. Do you have a cool cloth?" He shook his head dumbly. She nodded, already in motion. "Stay here." She disappeared into the executive kitchenette and returned a moment later with a damp towel. She folded it expertly and laid it across Lily's forehead. Lily sighed in her sleep, a small, unconscious sound of relief. "I'll ride down with you," Alara said, already pressing the button for the private elevator. "You shouldn't be alone." He could only nod, overwhelmed with gratitude. In the car, he drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his eyes locked on the road. Alara sat in the back, cradling Lily, murmuring soft, soothing words. She was a beacon of calm, a steady presence that allowed him to function, to breathe. He was the billionaire CEO, a man people called powerful, but in that moment she was the one with all the strength. At the clinic, she handled everything. She spoke to the nurses, filled out the forms when his hands were shaking too much to write legibly, and held Lily's hand while the doctor examined her. It was just a nasty flu virus, they were told. Frightening, but not dangerous. They gave him a prescription for a fever reducer and sent them home. The drive back was quiet. The crisis had passed, leaving behind an emotionally charged stillness. Lily was asleep in the back, her head resting in Alara's lap, the fever having finally started to break. Julian glanced in the rearview mirror. He saw the soft glow of the streetlights illuminating Alara's face as she gently stroked Lily's hair. The image was so natural, so maternal, so profoundly right, that it stole the air from his lungs. They were almost home when a small, sleepy voice drifted from the back seat. "You feel like Mommy," Lily murmured, her words slurred with sleep but perfectly clear in the silent car. The simple, innocent declaration landed with the force of a physical blow. Julian's breath hitched. He saw Alara flinch in the rearview mirror, her hand freezing in Lily's hair. Her eyes, wide and vulnerable, met his in the small rectangle of glass. It was the truth. The unfiltered, unvarnished truth of a child's heart. Alara's calm strength, her gentle competence, her unconditional warmth. It was the maternal energy that had been a gaping void in their lives for 2 long years. Lily had recognized it, and now she had given it a name. The rest of the drive passed in a thick, potent silence. When they pulled up to his building, he turned off the engine. I don't know how to thank you, Alara," he said, his voice hoarse. "You don't have to," she whispered, her gaze still fixed on the sleeping child in her lap. "Any mother would have done the same." The unspoken implication hung in the air between them. "But I am not her mother." He helped her carry a still sleeping Lily inside. After they had tucked her into bed, they stood awkwardly in the grand, silent foyer of his penthouse. The space felt too big, too formal for the raw intimacy of the moment. Alara looked around, at the polished floors and the priceless art on the walls. She seemed to be retreating, putting the distance of their professional lives back between them. "I should go," she said, her voice barely audible. "My shift." "Stay," he said, the word coming out with more force than he intended. He softened his tone. "Please, let me call you a car in the morning. It's late." She hesitated, then gave a small nod. He showed her to a guest room, a luxurious and impersonal space that felt entirely wrong. He could not sleep. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows in his living room, looking out at the city, but seeing nothing. He saw a hospital room. He saw a car seat with a sleeping child. He saw a woman's gentle hands. He knew with a terrifying, exhilarating certainty that he was falling in love with her. It wasn't just gratitude. It was a deep, soul-level recognition. He was falling for her strength, her kindness, her quiet dignity. He was falling for the woman who saw the sad man behind the CEO, the woman who brought bandages for his daughter and calm for his panic. And as she lay in the guest room, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, Alara was having her own realization. She had spent years building walls around her heart, protecting herself from the kind of pain and disappointment that had defined her past. She had told herself she needed to be self-reliant, that she could not afford to depend on anyone. But tonight, she had not felt like a cleaner helping her boss. She had felt like a partner. She had seen Julian not as a figure of immense power, but as a terrified father, vulnerable and human, and her heart had gone out to him. Hearing Lily's sleepy words had cracked something open inside her, something she had thought was permanently sealed. She was falling for him, for his quiet sadness, for his secret acts of kindness, for the gentle way he looked at his daughter. It was terrifying, and it felt impossibly like coming home. In the days that followed Lily's illness, a new unspoken tension settled between them. The near tragedy had stripped away their pretenses, leaving their feelings exposed and raw. Their late-night conversations became shorter, more charged with things left unsaid. They were both afraid of the chasm between their worlds, afraid of the vulnerability that love demanded. Alara began to pull away. She was polite, professional, but the warmth was guarded. She was trying to protect herself, and in her mind, to protect him. A relationship between the CEO and a member of the cleaning staff was a complication he did not need, a scandal she could not afford. Her withdrawal was a physical pain for Julian. Just as he had found a flicker of light, it was being extinguished. He respected her reasons, but he could not accept them. It was then that the outside world, which they had managed to keep at bay in their quiet, late-night bubble, came crashing in. A man appeared at the office one afternoon, asking for Alara. He was slick and vaguely menacing, with an air of entitlement that set Julian's teeth on edge. Julian watched from his office as his security chief, a man named Peters, professionally intercepted him. Peters reported to him later. The man was Dante Reyes, Alara's ex-boyfriend. He had heard a rumor that Alara was close to Julian Vance. He was making threats, suggesting he had stories to sell to the tabloids, sordid, fabricated tales of a gold-digging cleaner seducing her billionaire boss. He wanted money to stay quiet. A cold, precise fury settled over Julian. His first instinct was primal, to crush this man, to use the full weight of his power and wealth to obliterate him. But he paused. He thought of Alara's pride, of her fierce self-reliance. Solving her problem with a wave of his hand would diminish her, turning her into a damsel in distress, and him into a generic rich man rescuer. That was not who they were. He had Peters conduct a thorough, discreet investigation into Dante Reyes. It did not take long to find what he was looking for. The man had a history of fraud, of preying on women and leaving them in financial ruin. He had outstanding warrants in 2 other states. He was a predator. Instead of paying the blackmail, Julian had his legal team draft a letter. It was a masterpiece of controlled aggression. It did not threaten. It simply laid out the facts. Dante's history of extortion, the evidence of his financial crimes, the names of his other victims who were willing to testify. It concluded by stating that if he ever contacted Alara Hayes or any employee of Vance Holdings again, this information would be delivered not to the tabloids, but to the district attorney's office. It was a checkmate. It did not involve Julian's money, only his resources. It was a tool he was giving Alara, empowering her to remove the threat herself. He had a copy of the letter delivered to her anonymously, along with all the supporting documentation. He did not hear from her for 2 days. The silence was agonizing. He saw her at work, but she avoided his gaze, her face pale and strained. He feared he had overstepped, that he had confirmed her worst fears about his high-handed power. On the 3rd night, she was waiting for him outside his office. She was holding the file. "Did you do this?" she asked, her voice tight, unreadable. He did not lie. "My legal team prepared it, yes." "Why?" she asked, her brown eyes searching his face. "Why would you get involved?" He took a step closer to her, his heart in his throat. This was it. The moment where everything would either crystallize or shatter. "Because he was trying to hurt you," he said, his voice low and steady. "Because he is a part of a past that you have fought so hard to overcome, and I could not stand by and watch him drag you back into it." "You could have just paid him," she said, testing him. "That's not what you needed," he replied instantly. "You don't need a savior, Alara. You have been your own hero for a very long time. I just gave you a better sword." He paused, taking another step until they were only inches apart. "All this time, I've watched you. I've watched you protect Lily. You gave her a bandage for her knee. You gave her comfort when she was sick. You gave her your warmth when I had none left to give. You protect her. Please, let me protect you." Her composure finally broke. A tear traced a path down her cheek. She looked from the file in her hands to his face, and in her eyes he saw not anger or resentment, but a dawning, overwhelming wave of emotion. He had not misunderstood her. He had seen her, truly seen her, for who she was. She closed the small distance between them and reached out, not to touch his face or his chest, but to simply take his hand. Her fingers laced with his. It was the first time they had touched with clear, romantic intent. The simple contact was electric, a silent acknowledgement of everything that had been building between them. It was not a gesture of gratitude. It was a gesture of acceptance, of partnership. "Julian," she whispered, and his name was a prayer. "I'm falling in love with you, Alara," he said, the words he had held back for so long finally breaking free. "I think I have been since the moment I saw you give my daughter a cookie." A watery smile broke through her tears. "I think," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I have been falling in love with the sad man in the cafe who forgot how to smile." He lifted their joined hands and gently kissed her knuckles. The cold, sterile quiet of the executive floor faded away, replaced by the sound of their breathing, the frantic, hopeful beating of their two hearts, finally in sync. The chasm between their worlds was gone. In its place, they had built a bridge, hand in hand. 3 months later, the city was basking in the golden glow of a late autumn afternoon. Julian stood on a newly completed rooftop terrace, a verdant oasis of green in the heart of the concrete jungle. It was the public dedication of the Caroline Vance Memorial Garden, a project he had funded, a space of peace and reflection open to all. But it was more than that. He adjusted the microphone, looking out at the assembled crowd of city officials, employees, and press. "My late wife, Caroline, believed that beauty could be found anywhere," he began, his voice clear and steady. "She believed in second chances, in the power of a single seed to grow into something magnificent." He paused, his gaze finding Alara in the front row. She was holding Lily's hand, looking up at him with eyes full of love and pride. She was no longer wearing a cleaner's uniform, but a simple, elegant dress, the color of a summer sky. "This garden," he continued, "is a testament to that belief. But I cannot take credit for its beauty, the design, the vision, the heart of this place. That all comes from an extraordinarily talented landscape architect who is just at the beginning of her career." He smiled, looking directly at Alara. "A woman who taught me that gardens can grow in the most unexpected of places, Miss Alara Hayes." A soft gasp went through the crowd, followed by a ripple of applause. Alara's face was a picture of shocked, radiant joy. She had designed the garden as part of a university project he had secretly funded, believing it was an anonymous scholarship. She had no idea he was going to credit her so publicly. It was not a gift. It was a platform, a testament to her talent, a validation of her dreams. He stepped away from the podium and walked towards them. He knelt down in front of Lily. From his pocket, he produced a small, velvet box. "Lilybug," he said, using his old pet name for her. He opened the box to reveal a silver locket. "I have something for you." He opened the locket. On one side was a tiny, perfect photograph of her mother, Caroline, smiling brightly. "This is so you never forget your mommy in heaven." Lily touched the picture with a tiny finger. Then Julian pointed to the other side. It was a new picture, one they had taken just last week in a park. Julian, Lily, and Alara, all laughing, huddled together. "And this," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "is so you remember it's okay to have two mommies to love, one in your heart and one right here." Lily threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. Over her head, Julian looked at Alara. Her face was wet with tears, but she was smiling the most beautiful smile he had ever seen. He stood up, still holding Lily's hand, and took Alara's with his other. He turned back to the microphone, to the waiting crowd, to the entire world. "I learned a long time ago that a home is not the walls that surround you," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "It is the people who fill the space inside. Alara, you and Lily are my home." He turned to her fully, his heart open, his last wall of defense now completely dismantled. "Alara Hayes, would you and your incredible talent for growing things be willing to take on one more project? Building a life, a family with me? Will you marry me?" The crowd faded away. The cameras and the applause became a distant hum. There was only Alara's face, her eyes shining. She did not speak. She simply nodded, a silent, tearful, joyful yes. The story could have ended there, with the grand public declaration and the happy tears. But their real story, the heart of it, was not about grand gestures. It was about quiet moments. The following Saturday, the newly formed family of 3 walked into a small, quiet cafe. The sun, no longer a pale, indifferent disk, streamed through the windows, bathing the room in warm, honeyed light. They sat at a small table by the window. Julian watched as Alara broke a single, lopsided, imperfect oatmeal raisin cookie into 3 pieces. She handed one to him, one to Lily, and kept one for herself. Lily, now sporting a new locket over her dress, took a bite and beamed. "It tastes like cinnamon," she said happily. Julian looked at Alara, whose smile was the brightest thing in the room. He looked at his daughter, whose laughter was the sweetest music. The grayness was gone. The silence was filled. The long, cold winter of his grief had finally given way to a brilliant, impossible spring. He took a bite of his cookie. It was warm and sweet, and it tasted, he thought, exactly like home.